Boa noite, pessoal. Bem-vindos a mais um dia de evento da comunidade Salesforce de Arquitetos Curitiba, Brasil. Welcome to the Flosum team, Jason, Charlie, that's English speakers. Welcome to the event. First introduction, I'm gonna do in Portuguese for the community, and after that, you guys are free to switch to English. As o Gustavo just do the normal work, whatever, right? And folks, again, thank you very much for the time that you are sharing with us. I know Flosum, right? And I know this will help a lot of people to understand all the capabilities of this great tool offered to us. And again, thank you very much for your time, for your presence, for the knowledge that you guys are gonna share with us. Thank you very much. Pessoal, então vamos começar a nossa introdução normal, né? Bom, meu nome é Maurício, acho que a maioria dos que estão aqui já me conhece, sou líder dessa comunidade. Para entrar em contato comigo, tem meu e-mail da comunidade, mauricio.silva@trailblazecgl.com. Tem o canal do YouTube, onde que a gente posta os eventos que acontecem nessa comunidade, sempre estão lá, normalmente no dia seguinte do evento, colocado lá. E para quem também quer entrar em contato comigo no LinkedIn, está aqui meu LinkedIn, para entrar em contato comigo. Já trabalho com Salesforce há mais de 12 anos, sou o Salesforce MVP, graças ao apoio de vocês, e espero que continue por mais tempo como MVP. E o objetivo é sempre tentar ajudar a comunidade, as pessoas a se desenvolverem dentro desse nosso universo Salesforce. Bom, como eu comentei no início, tem no chat, em cima está pinado, um formulário para concorrer a 2 vouchers que a empresa Flosum está agraciando a nossa comunidade, os participantes desse evento. Então, preencham aí o formulário, que no final o Gustavo vai realizar o sorteio deles. Os próximos eventos da nossa comunidade, então, nós temos mais um evento, né, dia 14 de agosto, que a gente vai falar, que eles vão falar sobre o Flosum Trust Center, que é uma ótima ferramenta, né, que em tudo é uma das coisas também que agrega muito a todo esse toolset da Flosum. Então, não percam. Logo eu vou começar a divulgação com link e tudo. Então, também vai ser um outro excelente evento para você participar e entender melhor essa ferramenta que nos ajuda dia a dia a fazer as coisas mais simples e fáceis dentro desse universo Salesforce. Aí também vai ter em setembro um evento lá no Dreamforce, onde eu vou fazer um encontro dos brasileiros que vão estar participando do Dreamforce. Então, quem for para o Dreamforce, se inscreve aqui que no dia que do evento lá vai ser cobrado o ingresso só para escanear que você está participando. Vamos falar sobre Flosum Data Backup e Flosum Data Migration. Então, vamos ter sobre a Flosum, provavelmente uma demo, né, Gustavo? Q&A e no final o sorteio. Deixa eu só parar de compartilhar minha tela e show com vocês de novo. De novo, Gustavo, muito obrigado aí por você e seu time estar presente mais uma vez aqui na nossa comunidade.
Beleza, boa noite pessoal, obrigado Maurício pela oportunidade, pelo espaço aqui para a gente discutir mais uma vez com o time. Pessoal, também obrigado aí, 6 horas da tarde aqui na quarta-feira, o pessoal passou o dia trabalhando, o pessoal meio cansado, mas agradeço a oportunidade, espero que a gente compartilhe o tanto de informações e conhecimento que vocês estão esperando. Pessoal, assim como semana passada, assim, eu estou vendo aqui, muita gente estava no nosso evento da semana passada, mas também tem gente que eu acho que não estava, então eu vou passar com um overview bem rápido aqui da Flosum. Quero falar um pouco da ferramenta, né, da parte de backup e migração, e depois eu passo a palavra para o time. Eu vou até apresentar o time aqui quando eu compartilhar minha tela. Tem só um minuto para compartilhar. Window. Okay. Bom, pessoal, o time hoje aqui, eu sou o Gustavo, então com a parte de Latam, aqui na Flosum. A gente tem o Bruno, que é o CSM dos nossos clientes aqui na Flosum. Tem a plantação e todo o suporte pós-implantação. O Bruno aqui dá essa ajuda. E hoje estou aqui com 2 backups aqui bem técnicos, o Charlie e o Jason. O Charlie é nosso especialista em backup de dados e o Jason, que fez a apresentação de DevOps semana passada, vai falar de migração de dados, a parte de CPQ, de teste, de migração de dados para sandbox. Então a gente vai já chegar lá. Maurício, se alguém tiver alguma pergunta, você pode me interromper, ok? E perguntar.
Tranquilo. Só uma coisinha, o pessoal tá falando que tá com um erro aqui do CAPTCHA não tá aparecendo. Eu fui fazer um teste no form, é verdade, não tá aparecendo o CAPTCHA para validar.
Bruno, não sei se o Bruno tá aqui.
Ele dá uma mensagem, tipo assim, ele dá uma mensagem de gift cards will be sent with 48 hours, good luck. Tá, não, isso tem uma mensagem. É só failed to validate CAPTCHA, please try again. Só que não aparece o CAPTCHA no form, tá bom?
Certo.
Pro
Ok.
Guilherme apareceu, então deve ser alguma coisa.
Bruno, qualquer coisa tu pega o e-mail do pessoal e registra lá, manualmente mesmo, que aí a gente a gente participa do sorteio, a gente coloca aqui manualmente no sorteio. Bom, pessoal, Flosum, parceiro Salesforce desde 2014. Estamos com 3 soluções na App Exchange, DevOps, que a gente foi nossa primeira solução, a gente comentou semana passada, toda a parte de release management de metadados, a parte de gerenciamento de dados, que é o que a gente vai falar hoje, que inclui backup, recovery e archival de dados. Archival é quando você tem um org com storage ali perto dos 100%, que você quer tirar uns dados para deixar isso em AWS, Azure, Google Cloud. E também o Data Migration, que é para migração de dados esquerda no pipeline, né, com CPQ, por exemplo, ou direita para esquerda, quando você quer jogar dados em ambiente de teste, inclusive o mascaramento de dados. E na próxima semana a gente vai falar de Trust Center, que é uma solução para você aumentar as posturas de segurança do seu ambiente Salesforce e monitorar, auditar, tirar relatórios. A gente vai mais detalhes no Trust Center na próxima semana. Pessoal, então aqui tem um portal, vocês se cadastrem com e-mail institucional, não aceita Gmail, Hotmail, Yahoo, não aceita. Aqui vocês têm certificações que são gratuitas, tem a parte de passo a passo, como fazer, tem a parte de comunidade. Então, você tem uma comunidade que o pessoal discute melhores práticas, fazem sugestões, bem parecido com a comunidade da Salesforce. E alguns de nossos clientes na região, então esses que estão em rosa, que são os clientes Brasil ou América Latina, né? A gente tem uns aqui que são Chile, Argentina, mas é mais para mostrar assim, que a gente tem clientes de range de, acho que começa com 5 licenças a centenas, 200, 300 licenças. Isso só falando de Brasil. Então aqui são nomes aqui, a gente é bem flexível para o tamanho do time. Pessoal, agora falando de gerenciamento de dados, né? Esse slide aqui eu acho importante trazer, porque a responsabilidade da Salesforce é fazer a segurança da org em si, não dos dados. Então, a segurança dos dados, é importante frisar que é do usuário, do cliente da Salesforce. Né? Se alguém por erro apagar ali um dado, ou fizer um deploy para produção que apagou uma carga de dados, que seja, isso não é responsabilidade da Salesforce. Essa segurança do dado em si. Esse dado é uma responsabilidade do usuário. Né? Então, muita gente pensa que por estar com o Salesforce, estar com os dados backupeados, até existe uma possibilidade de você recuperar uma parte dos dados com XML da Salesforce, mas é um processo bem mais complexo e demora algumas semanas para você conseguir esse XML. A ideia da ferramenta de backup de dados é, apaguei aqui um dado hoje, amanhã eu notei esse dado está apagado, já restauro e volto ali para o meu lugar. E segurança também, né? A gente tem a opção de fazer um backup em outra cloud, né? Então a gente não está só naquele Salesforce, a gente faz um backup no AWS ou no Azure ou no Google Cloud. O seu dado está sempre em dois cantos, vai estar na Salesforce e vai estar em outra nuvem. Então, esse aqui é um primeiro aspecto que eu acho interessante a gente levantar, é que a segurança do dado é do cliente, não do Salesforce. Pessoal, nossa ferramenta de backup. Então, é um backup simples. Com um clique você faz um backup, você pode automatizar, eu quero um backup a cada 6 horas ou a cada 12 horas. Recovery do mesmo jeito. Você pode comparar backups. E também você serve para fazer a parte de sandbox seeding, né? Então, se você tiver ali, se você tiver os ambientes de testes e quiser jogar da produção para esse ambiente de testes, isso tudo está incluso no gerenciamento de dados, né? Então, o que a gente está falando hoje aqui não é só backup, mas gerenciar esse dado. Esquerda para direita para esquerda no seu pipeline, como migrar isso. Porque uma opção que a gente vai ter no Data Migration é você instalar ele no sandbox e desenvolver ali configurações de CPQ e migrando isso à direita, até chegar em produção, né? Porque a gente vê muito problema hoje em dia, você tem que ficar repetindo aquele mesmo criação de dados de ambiente para cada ambiente. Então a gente também tem essa opção de jogar da esquerda para a direita para a esquerda, não é só backup, é toda a gestão dos dados. A arquitetura, pessoal. A gente tem uma opção de hostear pela Flosum. Então, se você não quiser envolver o time de infraestrutura, ou até mesmo por questão de praticidade, a gente pode separar um ambiente AWS para o cliente, ambiente separado só dele, e fazer o backup nesse ambiente. Ou algumas empresas que têm mais restrições de GDPR, PII, depende do país que tiver, o dado tem que ficar talvez no mesmo ambiente onde esteja a org. Por exemplo, a org está nos Estados Unidos, então o dado não pode ficar no Brasil, eu quero que vá para o ambiente meu lá nos Estados Unidos, que o dado nunca sai daquele país. Então a gente dá a opção também sempre de fazer self-hosted, né? Então o cliente ele tem a opção de hostear ele próprio o dado. Então aqui a gente dá duas opções, direi que é 50% cada um dos nossos clientes decide, pela uma opção ou pela outra. E pessoal, aqui algumas das nossas funcionalidades, certo? Eu acho legal trazer que além do dados também, essa solução a gente faz um backup de metadados. Então é mais uma segurança para o seu metadados também, que vai ser backupeado junto com a solução de backup. Isso aqui tudo o time vai cobrir hoje, mas acho legal a gente compartilhar. Se alguém tiver alguma dúvida, por favor, me interrompam. Pessoal, parte do gift card. Bruno, deu certo? O que eu estou pensando, talvez, pessoal, é que quem registrou semana passada esteja não consiga registrar. Então, se isso acontecer, a gente vai registrar manualmente. A minha ideia que eu estou tendo aqui é de pegar esses e-mails e jogar aqui na planilha. Aí você perguntar para o Bruno como é que ficou. Ah, certo. Então, mesmo quem não tá com o captcha aparecendo, você está recebendo aí o... Beleza. Pessoal, e o link está aqui em cima no chat, como o Maurício compartilhou mais cedo, tem um link, vocês clicam aí, se registram, e no final da apresentação a gente faz o sorteio. Então vamos começar, pessoal, com a parte de Data Migration, certo? Essa apresentação vai ser em inglês, com o Jason, mas se alguém tiver alguma dúvida no inglês ou na solução, por favor, interrompa e a gente ajuda aqui a responder. O que for saindo aqui no chat, eu vou tentando responder aqui no chat, o que eu não souber, aí eu peço ajuda aí pro Jason e pro Charlie. Ok? Pessoal, alguma pergunta? Caso não, eu vou parar de compartilhar. Hey, Jason, we'll start with you and data migration, please.
Give me 1 second to get set up here. All right, ignore that. Okay. So today we'll dive into data migration. And if anyone on the call sat on the DevOps demonstration, I will say data migration is a lot more simple. With DevOps, process does matter a lot and culture within the team. Data migration, there's like one right way to do everything. Now, before we hop into the product, I always like to share Flosum's architecture. So data migration, it's actually another managed package native to Salesforce, but it's going to be installed in your source org where you want to move data from. So two use cases here. The primary use case for data migrations is sandbox seeding. In that example, if you want to take a subset of production data, you would install this package in production, and this could migrate data from a partial copy down to a developer sandbox. Now, another use case for data migrations is migrating record-based configuration. So if anyone's configuring in CPQ, Encino, Viva CRM, for example, the configuration you do it's tricky. It's not stored as metadata, it's actually data. So data migration can move your record-based config from developer sandbox to your full copy to production. Whether you migrate right to left or left to right, click for click, this is the same process. Now, the important part from a security perspective, Flosum does not have servers. We do not process or have access to your data. It remains within your control at all times. With that being said, let's hop into the product. All right, so for today, we'll focus on the first use case, sandbox seeding. So there's two primary tabs that end users will work out of. That's going to be your data sets and your sequences. You'll always start with your data sets. So if I click new, data sets are going to dictate what object do you want to migrate? What fields do you want to migrate? What's the criteria for those fields? So first thing, I'll just give this a unique name. And then all of these objects, these are all the objects I have in my source org. For today, let's use a familiar object like the account. Once I have that object selected, down below here, we can pick and choose what fields we want migrated. If you need to migrate everything, that is not an issue. We can bring it all over. Now, when you're seeding sandboxes, you could be running the risk of migrating PII or sensitive information. If we pretend annual revenue, if I deem that sensitive, I can double click this and you'll see it'll mask this value. So when Flosum migrates that down to a sandbox, we'll still honor the metadata type, but we'll truly randomize that value for you. So your team's in full control of what gets masked. Now down below, when some teams are seeding sandboxes, developers might not necessarily care what records they get. They just say, you know what, I need 15,000 of the latest account records, just something legitimate to test with. Now, in the other example, maybe a developer is testing a specific application. You can add your filters down below here. So maybe I want to migrate all accounts where the billing country equals Canada, for example. And by default, these are all end statements. But if you want some flexibility, you can add your filter logic down below and make them end or statements. The choice is yours. Now, declarative filters, strongly preferred by admins. Developers, you do have the flexibility to write your where clause here. Now, being transparent with the where clause or the SOCL filter, you can cross-reference objects. So maybe you want to bring in related cases to these accounts. Admins, don't panic. You can't do that here yet, but we will complete that with the next step. So typically when I'm training teams, I will tell them you don't need to build out a data set for every single object you're looking to migrate. Figure out what that driving object is, typically the parent. Once you have that defined, teams will ask, well, I can migrate the account, but what about the cases, the contacts, the opportunities? We're going to bring those in over here in the sequences tab. So pretend I save this. Let's move on to bring in the children and the parents that I see fit. So over here in the sequences, just know if I click new or I modify an existing one, same screen, same process. But whenever I attempt to create a new sequence or modify an existing one, you're going to see this analyzer bar up here. What Flosum's doing is we're analyzing your data schema. That way we have the most up-to-date information to work off of. So for right now, we just have to be patient for about 5 more seconds. All right. So you'll see here in this sequence, I have 7 objects I want to migrate. But if I think that this isn't enough, I need to bring in some more children, I can add the related child objects with this purple button. I can add the related parent objects with this orange button. So let's say I need to bring in some more children to the contact. Give me a couple seconds here, and I'm going to click at random for today's example. We'll bring in cases, we bring in notes, and let's bring in tasks as well. All right, so 5 related objects. When I click close, you'll notice Flosum automatically sequenced these. Some of these came 5 through 7, others came 9 through 10. Flosum understands the order of operations. So if you've ever used Data Loader or Workbench, the order of operations falls on you. That's a lot of trial and error. You don't need to worry about that anymore. And if you see here, these existing data sets, they're hyperlinked. So I could always modify them, but you'll notice 5 through 7, these aren't hyperlinked. If I were to save this, Flosum would automatically create those data sets for you. So that's where, coming back to the original use case, you don't need to figure all of this out ahead of time. But piggybacking off this, maybe I need to add a parent object to social persona. If I click on the purple button, we can add leads, for example. And you'll see leads jumped all the way to 3rd, even before the contacts. Now, this is the very important part. Technically, the contact, it is a child of the account, but I don't want to run the risk of migrating orphaned or random contacts. These are your overlay steps. It could say only migrate contacts related to my parent records above. This ensures that when I migrate data, I will get a very defined subset of data and all the lookup fields are populated. Now, some teams will ask about, what about recursive relationships? What about an object that looks up to itself? So the parent account looks up to the child account. We have you covered with your recursive steps here. Flosum can keep looping through these relationships to find all the related records. The green buttons here are definitely for more complex data structures. But fast forwarding this, let's just pretend that I want to migrate 13 objects now, and this looks good. The next 2 steps, I will say, are optional. You don't have to do them, but I would recommend that they are best practice. First would be to view your records. Think of this, comparing it to release management. Think of this as a validation. It's simply a dry run to see what would happen. So if I click create here, let's see if I'm quick enough to catch this. Down below here in the logs, Flosum will always start off with the field level security validation. So if your system admin doesn't have read or write access to the target org, we'll flag that right away. Salesforce fails it, so we won't even try it. But scrolling up, here we can see this mock migration would have been completed. With 126 records migrated, this is such a tiny subset of data. Flosum will tell you the space required in my sandbox. So I know for a fact this will definitely fit my DevPro sandbox. And then here I can do some due diligence. How many records would we process for each object? If I'm happy with the results, and we can pretend we are, this next step again is optional. But if you know the org you're going to migrate to has a ton of automation, I don't want to fire off any triggers, any validation rules or workflows, for example. I have the ability to disable them in my target org. Now you'll see here for every object in my sequence, maybe I know there's a ton of triggers on my account and contact object. I do have the flexibility to disable these. One thing to note, process builders and flows, it rolls up to the same component. So this has you covered for both of those. Now in either instance, if I opt to disable this, or maybe I skip this step, the next logical thing would be to migrate my data. So over here in my sequences, the next logical thing, just click migrate data. Now your team has 2 options. When I click create, if this is a one-off instance you're migrating to, you could manually type in the username and password. Or if you know you're going to be frequently updating this data in your sandbox, you can actually register your destination orgs in the settings tab. So if I click on my registered selected orgs, you'll see 2 orgs I can choose from here. If I were to log in, that data is migrated. So there's 2 last things I do like to show the teams or talk about. First, your data sets and sequences, think of them as templates. Once you have them built, it is rinse and repeat. You can clone them. You can edit them. You can reuse them at any point in time. And now, very similar to the release management solution, sometimes you can migrate data. You look in your org and you think that does not look correct. You do have the ability to roll back that data. Now for today, this was simply a dry run or I did a validation. That's why you see it's grayed out. But if I insert those records and I don't like them, I have the flexibility to roll those back. I can always modify a data set or sequence, retry it again when I'm ready. So this first use case was strictly for sandbox seeding. Now, if anyone on the call is using CPQ, click for click, this is the exact same process. Build your data sets, define your parent-child relationships. The only difference with CPQ is Flosum comes out of the box with predefined data sets. A lot of that legwork is figured out for you. Now, the painful part with sandbox refreshes, sometimes your CPQ data doesn't always copy down. Flosum actually built one very long sequence for CPQ where you can actually seed your sandbox to make sure it's up to date with your partial or full copy, for example. And give this a couple seconds to load. But here you can see we've defined the sequence for all of these data sets. And this is ready to use out of the box. All right. So I tried to keep this short, and it's a lot shorter of a demonstration than Flosum DevOps, but I'll open this up to the team. Any questions around building data sets, migrating data, configuring your parent and child relationships before we turn this over to Charlie to talk about data backup and recovery?
Pessoal, alguma pergunta no que foi apresentado, na criação de dataset, na migração, possibilidade de rollback, o relacionamento entre os dados, como é que foi feito? Se não tivermos perguntas, essa demo é bem mais curta, né? Se não tivermos perguntas, a gente vai passar para a parte de backup. Ok, por enquanto nada. Charlie.
All right, thanks, Jason. Thanks, Gustavo. Gustavo already kind of touched on the Flosum backup architecture, but I'll just show that slide one more time, and then we'll look at a quick overview of Flosum backup, the homepage dashboard. I'll demonstrate how quick and easy it is to connect orgs, and then we'll discuss our backups. We'll do a restore. We'll walk through archiving, and then we also have some search functionality that can help support regulatory compliance needs like GDPR, where if a customer requests that you delete all their information, we all know how to do that in Salesforce. We just go and delete their contact or their account and then permanently delete that from the recycle bin. But if we've been backing our org up for months or years, we need to prove that we can delete that information across all of our backups and archives as well. Like Gustavo mentioned, we have multiple options for where you can host your storage container. So we can provide you with an AWS storage container. You can also deploy our solution on any Docker compatible infrastructure. So if you want to deploy it on your own instance of AWS, Google Cloud Platform, Azure, we even support on-premise, but seeing as how we're in a modern cloud environment, that's not something that we see very often. So we can support data residency requirements as well. I always like to remind folks, because I talk to a lot of people who have never experienced a corruption event or had their data overwritten. So I always like to share a few examples of why you might want to back up your Salesforce org. Number one reason is often human error, right? Some folks might use Data Import Wizard to incorrectly import leads and contacts and information from, say, trade shows or conferences. Integrations that update data in Salesforce can also get, updated incorrectly and incorrectly overwrite data. So these are just a few of the things that backing up our Salesforce org can help protect against. Many of the other solutions in the marketplace use what's referred to as incremental backups, meaning you do your first full initial backup, and then every day after that, you do an incremental backup, but it also requires you to do a full backup kind of every Saturday is most common. And the challenge with this is that when we need to restore data, we usually need to restore it really quickly. And so when you're trying to restore from an incremental backup, you'll have to restore from your full backup, say from Saturday, and then you have to restore each incremental to get back to the day that you want to get back to. So say you wanted to get back to Thursday, you've got to restore Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then you'll eventually get to Thursday. So even if you know exactly where you're trying to recover back to, from a technology perspective, this can be pretty time consuming, right? And when these situations come up, we usually don't have much time, right? So with Flosum, we revolutionized Salesforce backups, and we refer to it as composite backups. So we're still doing the first full backup the very first time. And then every day after that, we're only capturing new and changed records. And then we're joining those changes into that first full initial backup. What this is going to allow us to do is not only save storage space on the back end, but this is also going to allow us to restore a lot faster. And that's what I'm going to demonstrate today. So let's hop into it. Here is the homepage dashboard of Flosum Backup and Archive. Each tile represents a different Salesforce org, so we can back up multiple production orgs. We can even back up sandboxes if you prefer to do that. My team, Jason and I, we all use the same backup instance. So you can see I'm backing up Jason's org, backing up Charlie's data org. We're going to get some high level metrics on the number of records that we backed up to date. So I really like this chart right here because this would help me identify a large record creation event. So say, for example, 200,000 records got created on August 2nd. That might alert me to go and investigate why that happened. If I want to connect a new org, I just click Add Organization, give it a friendly name, select whether it's a production or a sandbox environment. And once I click Add, this is just going to pop us out into the OAuth Salesforce login screen that we're all familiar with. And then we'll maintain that persistent connection between Flosum Backup and your org via the security token. Let's jump into my data org. So I'm adding and removing and modifying records every day. We're just going to get some more advanced metrics on my org in particular. I have performed 333 backups to date and a little over 1.4 million records. Notice that the size of my backup is relatively small. That's because we can compress records up to 60% with Flosum Backup, and that's going to help us save storage space on the back end. A few of the things that we'll want to set up kind of the first time is, of course, our backup frequency. So in my example, I'm backing up at 6 a.m., 11 a.m., and 5 p.m., which is going to give me multiple recovery points throughout the day. Currently, we can schedule backups to run as often as every 2 hours, and a future release will allow you to back up as often as every 15 minutes. So we've heard from a few of our customers, they have integrations that run every hour, and they want to match up their recovery points with their integration, which is a great use case. We are very respectful of the APIs, the Salesforce API governor limits. We also allow you to set governor limits specifically for Flosum Backup. So if you're a heavy consumer of the REST or the bulk API and you want to make sure that Flosum Backup isn't going to use up all of your API requests, you can say, hey, if Flosum Backup uses 80% of REST or 80% of our bulk APIs for the day, go ahead and pause that job for 24 hours. 24 hours later, Salesforce will give us more API requests to use, and then we can finish that job. This is not something that folks run into very often. You may run into this the very first time you do that big full backup because it's going to take a lot of time depending on the amount of data and files that you have in your Salesforce org. But I just like to call that out, that we are very respectful of the API governance limits. Next is our backup options. So of course we can back up metadata. We can back up big objects. Binary objects are going to be your files, attachments, images that exist in rich text fields, PDFs, all that good stuff. And then we provide you with, again, just more options and some lesser objects that you want to back up, like account history, feed tracking, things of that nature. And then lastly, it's always best practice to sign up for notifications, especially the first time you start using Flosum Backup. You'll get notifications of when jobs start, stop, and complete. So those email notifications will give you metrics on how long it took to perform your backups and a couple other details. But all information that we can see directly here in Flosum Backup. So I've been backing my org up for several months now. So let's go ahead and take a look at what our backups look like. Here we're going to get a list of jobs. Like I said, I'm backing up every day at 11 a.m., 6 a.m., 5 p.m. I can go view the logs for those jobs if I'd like. If I want to drill into a specific backup, so if I want to go look at some records that either got added or changed at my 6 a.m. backup, I can drill into it. I can see that 101 account records either got created or modified. And I can actually drill into those accounts. I could search by account ID. I can click into this record. I can view the data at that point in time at 6 a.m. this morning. In addition to that, I can click show history and I can paginate through my previous backups. Any field that's changed will be highlighted in yellow. So here you can see from my backup on Tuesday, the account name was Upsilon. And then here at 6 a.m. on Wednesday, the account name changed to Xi Partnership. So this is kind of our first method of comparing our current data versus previous backups. There might be instances where I want to run a backup manually. So we can run a composite backup, which is just going to back up everything that I showed you in the settings a moment ago. Alternatively, we can back up selective subsets of data. So the example that I like to use, I've pre-built a backup template to go and capture high value opportunities. So we would just give this a friendly name, and then we go ahead and click create. So a use case for this might be if we're making some development changes to our opportunity workflow. And of course, we're probably doing our deployments outside of business hours. We might want to back up all of our opportunities as well as their related records right before we do that DevOps activity. Maybe we're going to manipulate some data as part of that deployment. And so we want to be doubly sure that we have our high value opportunities and all our related records set aside explicitly in case anything goes wrong. We can restore those records quickly. So you might be thinking, well, how did you go about creating this backup template that we could just reuse for those examples? First, I need to define a data set. So much like Jason showed with Data Migrator, same terminology, data set. This is where we can pick our parent object of opportunity. We can create a declarative filter. And what's really nice about this is actually give me an idea of how many records I have in my org. So I have 34 opportunities that are over $100,000 in value. Just like you saw in Data Migrator, we can also use a SQL query. So if you have a more advanced query where you want to evaluate related records, we can do that as well. Since this query is blank, I can even use the count records feature here, and you can see I have a total of 9,853 opportunities in my org. From here, let's pivot to doing a restore. So we can restore data or metadata. So in the instance that a field doesn't exist and we wanted to put the data back, we'd have to first restore the metadata. Then once the metadata is put back into the org, then we can restore the data. In my example, I'm just going to restore data. We'll go ahead and click create. We're going to restore from a backup, but we can also restore from an archive, which I'll show you in a little bit. So I'm going to select backup. We'll click continue. Now this is where things get interesting and what's unique about Flosum's composite backup. So as I mentioned in the slide, we can compare 2 points in time and it'll recognize any changes or differences. And that's going to allow us to restore a lot faster, which is going to increase our recovery time objective. So here I need to select my known corruption point, and this is a backup of the bad data. So in my org that I'm backing up, I actually took an account, and the account name used to be Theta Group, and I changed it to Charlie. We didn't catch that for a while. We just want to restore it. I also overwrote some text in the description field. I just said, oops, this text was accidentally overwritten. So we want to return both of those fields back to their original values. So what I need to do is I need to select a backup with that bad data. So what I did prior to this call is I ran a quick Flosum backup. It took about a minute, and I captured that account that has that bad or that corrupt data. So now that the system knows, hey, this data is bad, now I can say I want to go recover to my recovery point, which is my backup with correct data. So I'm going to say, you know, all of this information looked correct at 6 a.m. So I want to go back to 6 a.m. We'll hit continue. Here we'll select the objects that we want to restore. So in my example, we're just going to do a simple account restore. Optionally, say an account got deleted, we can bring in any related objects along with that account. So if an account and all of its associated contacts or opportunities happen to got deleted, we can restore that entire relationship hierarchy. From here, since I happen to know the ID of the account that I want to restore, I can grab that and I can put that in my declarative filter. Alternatively, you can use other criteria to restore. So maybe, you know, all the accounts in Canada got deleted. We could say, hey, restore all accounts where country equals Canada. Of course, when we're doing operations like this, having the actual ID of the record is your best friend. That's going to allow you to be very precise with what you're restoring. You can click continue. Here, this is where we can pick and choose what fields we want to restore. So in my example, we wanted to restore name as well as description. So I could just select those two fields. Just for the sake of this demo, we're just going to proceed with restoring all of these fields. Here, I'm going to land on a preview. It's just going to be a summary of this is my corruption point. Here's my recovery point. These are all the fields that I'm going to restore on account. And then here's my filter. So now I'm going to go ahead and click create. And what's happening in the background is it's taking that known corruption point, that backup with the bad data, and it's comparing it against my restore point, the backup with the good data. And this is really fast. So if you see, I've run this job many, many times before, and it typically takes about a minute or two. If we want, we can click see logs and we can keep an eye on what this job's doing. Right now, it's just initializing, so there's really nothing to show. But in just a moment, we should get some results here in the logs. This is also a great time for questions. I see a question from David. Is it possible to include custom settings as well? So yes, in this organizational settings, we're backing up all metadata, which includes custom settings.
Só se tiverem alguma pergunta, podem colocar no chat ou que a gente interrompe aqui para responder. Okay?
And it looks like my comparison job, my preparation for restore is now done. So it found that one account that I wanted to restore. So we can use our breadcrumbs up here at the top, and I can return back, and this data preparation has been completed. So now I can process this. And one of the first steps that we want to do when we're restoring data is we probably want to disable some automation, right? We don't want to run into any validation rules that are going to prevent us from restoring this data. And then I can click into this record, and just like we could see with our backups, I can actually see the record not only, oh shoot, I need to clear my cache real quick. I'm sorry, folks. I did that right before the call, but seems like I need to do that again. I demo this quite often, so that's part of the reason I need to do that, because the screen is not displaying correctly. All right, let's disable those automations. All right, here we go. This is what I was expecting to see. So this is a really powerful screen. Not only can we just show the differences, so here you can see in my recovery point, the name of the account was originally Theta Group, and then in the org, it's currently Charlie, and in my corruption point, that backup with the bad data, it is also Charlie, and then you can see that I overwrote the description. So if we wanted to, we could actually cherry pick and choose certain values to keep or replace from each of these these points in time. In this case, I'm just going to say, hey, let's return everything back to theta group, and let's return the description back to that random group of text there. So I'll go ahead and click continue. We'll get our preview screen again. We're going to restore one record. We're going to update all these fields. We're going to disable all of these automation processes. So I'll go ahead and click restore. This is going to take, let's see, last time I ran it took about 2 minutes. So while we wait for that to run, and then I'll come back and I'll refresh that account page to see that those new values. While we're waiting for that, let's go talk about archiving. So archiving, I can go ahead and create an archive. Some reasons we might want to archive data is to free up storage space on Salesforce. Salesforce storage is really expensive. So the example I like to use is closed cases. So cases are often something that we don't have to report on typically, especially old cases. They've been closed for more than 90 days. So this is a great candidate to archive, say monthly. So every month, Flosum Backup and Archive can just offload old cases from our Salesforce org, freeing up storage. Cases often contain a lot of attachments, emails, screenshots, PDFs, so they usually take up a lot of storage space. So I'm just going to go ahead and run this now, and we'll call it old cases. And before I click create, I just want to show you all, I've got a dashboard of my org. We've got a little over 4,600 cases. And if I go, we'll go ahead and run this archive. Oh, looks like my restore job is still running. So we can only run one job at a time currently, but in a future release, we'll be able to run multiple jobs at a time. And so it looks like that's working on disabling automation processes. Should be done in just a moment. While we're waiting for that, the other thing I would like to show you is the search capability. So this is something that we can use to deeper inspect our backups, but we can also support that right to be forgotten, right? So if Jason contacts us and he says, hey, I need you to delete all of my information from your Salesforce org. Like I mentioned, we know how to do that in Salesforce. We can go to Jason's contact, delete his contact, go to the recycle bin, permanently delete them from Salesforce. But we've been backing up for years. So I could do a search across all my backups and archives. Not only can I go find Jason's contact record, but I can also find any cases or opportunities or accounts that he's associated with. Much like we can with our backups, I can drill into his contact, and I can actually see a list of all of the backups that Jason's contact record is contained in. So this is another way you could go about searching and kind of inspecting your data. But also, once we've confirmed that this is the record that we actually want to purge from all of our backups, if I click permanently delete, that's going to go ahead and delete Jason's contact record across all of our backups and archives, allowing us to comply with that GDPR compliance, regulatory compliance. Let's go back to my restore. It looks like that was complete. I can go see the results. So it successfully restored one account record. Let's come back to my org. Remember, I changed the account name from Theta Group to Charlie, and I also overwrote the description field. Let's go ahead and refresh. And we'll see that the account name is back to the original value of Theta Group. And if we go to the details, we've got our original description back too. So I know that was a really simple example, but I just wanted to show you all how quick and easy it is to do a restore. Now let's finish things up by doing that archive job. So just a reminder, I've got just over 4,600 cases in my org. I want to offload some of those. Let's go ahead and create archive. We'll say old cases. We'll go ahead and select my archive template, and we'll go ahead and click create. And just like we can with our backups and our restores, we can view the logs. Just a reminder, the way that I went and created this archive template, I first created a data set, and this is where I defined my declarative filter. And so let's get an idea of how many cases I might be deleting from my org. So it looks like 500, that's a good number. And from there, I created an archive template. And if you recall, this is where I can specify what related objects I want to archive along with my case. So I can click case, and here I'm archiving attachments, comments, the back and forth email messages, the case team members, the case feed items. So let's go check on that archive. Looks like it's still working, and it identified the 500 cases that I want to remove. And we're just using the bulk data jobs in the background. So you can also view the status of those jobs in setup. So it's just verifying all of the objects that I have in my archive template. And it just removed 500 case comments. It's about to remove 1,500 case feed items. All right, so it's fully completed deleting all of those objects. As promised, let's come back to my dashboard. I'm going to go ahead and refresh. We should see this total cases number drop by 500. Let me see if I can just refresh my page and force this dashboard to refresh a little bit faster. All right, so we went from just over 4,600 to a little over 4,100. You know, really quick and easy to not only back up your data, restore it, archive it, and comply with those regulatory compliance needs. The one thing I will say is we're investing extremely heavily in our backup and archive solution. So there's a lot of new enhancements and features on the horizon. But as it stands today, we just want to try and make it simple and easy, right? This is not a tool that hopefully you're not working in your backup and archive tool every day. This is only going to be something that you're going to hop into when an event occurs. And we just wanted to make it really easy and intuitive so that you don't have to go read multiple knowledge articles in order to restore data when you're under the gun and you need to fix things quickly. Looks like there was quite a bit of conversation in the chat, but does anyone have any other questions or comments? Great. Thank you.
Isso, já temos mais de 20 pessoas que enviaram o cadastro aqui.
Show. Pessoal, novamente, bom, com mais uma dúvida? Nada? Peraí, então vou compartilhar minha tela aqui. Então, já compartilhei o link do próximo evento, né, que é vamos falar sobre o Trust Center. Novamente, muitíssimo obrigado, pessoal, pela aula, novamente, fornecida por vocês. Agradeço muito, né? Então, obrigado também ao pessoal que está participando do nosso evento. Jason, Charlie, thanks a lot. Again, another masterclass. I really appreciate that. As I mentioned in the last meeting, right? You're not present, Charlie. I will be in Dreamforce. If you're gonna be there, let's get in touch to meet each other face to face this time. Right now, virtually, but face to face. And again, I have no words to thank you folks for this class. Bruno, valeu, meu amigo. Muito obrigado pelo teu suporte. Gustavo, de novo, tamo junto, meu amigo.
Obrigado.